Lord in heaven, please empower the truth so that the new may be reborn. Pilate said to Jesus, I cannot do more for you. The people have decided. He was miserable, and one could see his sadness, resignation. Then he said quietly, then he must be crucified along with those who have been condemned today. Then I saw warders approach Jesus. A Roman soldier placed a crown of thorns on his head and blood streamed down his face anew. The soldier shouted jeeringly, see the King of the Jews, he cannot help himself out of the situation, the miserable fool. Then he kicked Jesus. Our Messiah broke down in front of us and fell on his knees. Then they dragged him down the steps. The crowd was so thick that he had to fight our way through the surging mass of people to reach him. He was hauled to another place where he was publicly whipped. The warders brought a massive wooden cross. The crowd was whipped into a sarcastic uproar as the warder mocked. Carry your cross yourself. If you are truly king, stand upright and show us what you can do. You have awakened the dead, but you can't help yourself, O feeble king. Mary Magdalene was next to me and collapsed completely. Simon went to her and held her head in his hands until she had recovered somewhat and said, when you want to, we can go home. As she opened her eyes, she said, I cannot leave him now. But what I've seen tears my heart into two. I took her in my arms and said, Mary Magdalene, it has broken all of our hearts, but let us stay with him. Here he has nobody but us. We will not leave him, don't worry. Simon, help us, please. Mary Magdalene and I wish to go to him. Simon said, you are crazy. You cannot go to the front of this enormous crowd, and you risk being trampled to death. I said, no, Simon, but let us at least try it. The crowd pushed Jesus up to the hill of the Golgotha, where the Romans crucified their enemies. I could see Jesus drag his cross up the hill. We tried to get nearer to him, but there were so many onlookers who pushed past us when we tried to move forward. I really did not know whether we were in the midst of animals or human beings. They were bloodthirsty, with no motivation than evil glee. There were occasionally a few who were distraught and weeping, and I could not do anything other than say, don't cry for him, pray for him. Time seemed to stand still, but the sadistic crowd surged up the hill behind Jesus, greedy for bloody satisfaction. Suddenly a cry rang out, Jesus has fallen! He has collapsed. Mary Magdalene let out a heart-rending cry, I will go to him. I held her hand and said, come. We will get to him. Even if we have to kill the whole pack here, we will not leave him alone. Simon helped us to push our way through to Jesus. He was suddenly filled with an incredible power that took us both by the hand and pulled us through the horde until we could finally get near Jesus. I would have liked to have avoided the sight before me. Jesus dragged his cross up the hill, and the sadistic warders continued to whip him even as he fell to his knees. But again, he got to his feet and continued to drag his cross, as if he had some superhuman power in him. As we approached the plateau where several crosses had already been erected, something extraordinary happened. The crowd suddenly became silent, and there were no more shouts, "Crucify him." Great masses of people fell on their knees and started to pray. Andrew emerged from the crowd and was foolhardy enough to try to take the cross from Jesus and carry it himself. But he was immediately attacked by a warder, who threw him back and struck him, unconscious, to the ground. Simon was able to get to Andrew and lifted him and carried him on his shoulders. We followed Simon. We finally were able to get near to Jesus. His eyes were so swollen that he could scarcely see. It seemed that he had orientated himself basely entirely on the whip lashes of the warder to define the direction in which he should drag his cross. We finally came near enough to him that despite of his swollen eyes, he was able to recognize us. Then he raised his head and said, "There you are." But there was no possibility to us to help him since our path was blocked by Roman soldiers. Suddenly he appeared to have summoned additional strength, probably due to Simon's presence, and was able to drag his cross to the top of the hill. At the same time I saw Magda, who came to us and held my hand as we climbed to the place of the martyrdom, which was sealed off by the soldiers. Then Joseph of Arimathea suddenly appeared, and I caught sight of Mary and John in the crowd. Simon appeared to generate some particular energy so that the crowd did not dare to follow Jesus any further. We were then able to proceed to the top of the hill of Golgotha, only to be stopped by the soldiers. Meanwhile, Jesus had reached the place of his crucifixion, a gruesome sight, and one we could not approach closer. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, the Roman soldier that I had seen in Canaan was there. Simon went to speak to him, and the soldier recognized him. After this short conversation, Simon beckoned to us. Mary, John, Mary Magdalene, and I went to Simon. The cross was erected next to the others with ropes. Just down the hill from the place of his planned crucifixion, there was a tremendous clap of thunder that shook the whole hill and spooked the crowd. Mary Magdalene fainted, and I had to support her. I did not know which was louder, her scream or the sound of hammering as Jesus was nailed to the cross. Simon said, "The Roman had kept his promise to Jesus. He's letting us go and stay nearer to him." The Roman soldier then let us through and prevented others from approaching, but he said, "I'm afraid I cannot approach closer than that. You will have to remain here. If you stay here, you have my protection. Nobody will contradict me." I looked at him and said, "You also believe in him?" He answered, "Yes, I do, and I'm ashamed of my people. But my hands are tied. Now all that I can do is let you to be near him and protect you as long as you remain here." He was our sentinel. He allowed us to remain a few feet from the Messiah. Jesus was alone, and nobody came into contact with him apart from the slaves appointed by the Romans. Mary Magdalene and I kneeled and prayed. We saw how he hung from the cross and prayed to God, to heaven, whence he had come to us. Joseph from Arimathea took our sentinel to one side and spoke to him, after which the soldier nodded. Then Magda appeared beside me. She radiated particular energy which was familiar to me and said, "Not long to wait, and then our special knowledge will be called for. Forget what you see here. Miriam, collect your inner God-given powers together. Remember what you have learned with the Essenes. Nothing is decided. God's wonder is still with us." At the moment, everything was suddenly still, as if the world was holding its breath. The picture of Jesus on the cross somehow changed. Simon just stood there and looked at Jesus, with infinite patience. One could see the love that flowed between them. Curiously, I no longer saw the man on the cross, only Jesus as a godlike being. There were no people behind us. The Romans had pushed them all back down the hill. We were with him on the mountain of his destiny. In the 7th hour, Jesus suddenly spoke, "Lord, I give my spirit into your hands. It is done." Then his head fell on one side, and we were petrified in that moment. My heart almost stood still, and Magda took my hand and shook her head, saying, "Just wait." Joseph of Arimathea gave our Roman sentinel a signal, and the Roman went to Jesus, took a lance with a saturate sponge on it, and drove it between Jesus' ribs. Then he called out loud so that everyone could hear it, "He is dead." Joseph of Arimathea looked at us significantly. The others who hung on the cross were not yet dead. Jesus had died astonishingly quickly, and in this hour of heavens gave the signal. Everything came to a standstill, and time did not exist anymore. After some minutes, Jesus said, "Simon, as agreed." Simon spoke to Mary and me and said, "Joseph will try to get Jesus' body down from the cross as quickly as possible. He will use his connections to take it to Joseph's family grave. Joseph will request the corpse be transferred to the graveyard." Then Simon looked at us knowingly and said quietly, "Jesus is not dead. He's still alive. But we must move quickly." We left Golgotha, and Simon brought us to a place near the cemetery. He said, "Wait here. The woman there not to be seen at the graveyard." I asked Simon, "What is planned?" He replied, "Nothing is permanently predictable yet. Since Jesus is still alive, we will do all that is humanly possible to revive him." I protested, "But the Roman lance penetrated right through his body." Simon smiled and said, "The sponge was soaked in anesthetic. Have you not learned from the great Essene magicians since time immemorial what one can do with the human body? You have surely not forgotten. But now I must go. I must leave you alone for a while." After some time, Simon returned and said Joseph of Arimathea had arranged that Jesus would be taken down from the cross rapidly. He was able to persuade the high priest that Jesus was indeed dead, and begged for his body to be released for burial. We returned to the cross where Jesus hung, and the sympathetic Roman soldier ordered a colleague to assist in gentle lowering the cross to the ground. We extracted the nails and removed Jesus from the place of his indignity. The Romans were cooperative and helped us carry him. Together we placed him gently on a stretcher. As we carried him to the family grave of Joseph of Arimathea, which was embedded the hill, Jesus' mother Mary enveloped his near-life body with all her love. Simon touched Jesus and said, "He is alive. We must act quickly now." Our benevolent Roman soldier ordered 2 of his company to come with us to watch over the grave. He said, "You are responsible for the seeing that nobody comes near the grave." As we carried Jesus, I noticed that he emitted a singular energy, but was apparently not breathing. Nevertheless, I was sure that he was still alive. We laid Jesus in a stone tomb, and the Roman ordered his 2 soldiers to go down the hill to the town administration and certify that Jesus of Nazareth was dead. He would remain there and watch over the grave discreetly from the distance, while he would ostensibly take leave of Jesus. When we were alone, Joseph of Arimathea said, "So, now you all have to show what you can do to revive him." Joseph had hidden elixirs, herbs, and ointments in the grave. First he gave Jesus a special potion to drink, which he has administered in small sips. And we suddenly realized what he was doing. I had spent long enough learned with the Essenes to know what we were truly capable of allowing a person to lapse into apparent death, and then reviving them by expelling the poison out of the body again with a special potion. I knew what Joseph had given him. Jesus then began to vomit and quivered due to cramps. Before our very eyes, life returned to his body, even though he was weak and scarcely conscious. But he was with us again. His whole being had revived. Each one of us played a part in healing him, restarting his breathing, his heart rhythm, and his full blood circulation. Magda was magnificent. She applied ointment and oil to his body so that the wounds gradually closed. Mary summoned all of her extraordinary healing powers. I returned to the full consciousness of our godly state and was able to assist Jesus' reanimation. Then Simon completed the healing of his wounds so that one slight scars remained. Jesus was almost fully restored to health. His breathing was normal and there was color in his cheeks, but he had still not returned to consciousness. Then we decided to close the tomb in which Jesus lay with a large rock. We enlisted the help of the 2 soldiers who had been watching over the grave outside, and with almost superhuman effort we closed the grave. Then Joseph of Arimathea said to the Roman soldier, "Now you can take over the watch. We have taken our leave of him and anointed him following our traditions." Then the 2 soldiers returned and stated that they had reported the death officially to the town administration. Then our Roman friend ordered, "You 2 can keep watch over the grave now. I will relieve you later." He gave us the signal that it was time for us to leave the tomb. I do not think he knew what he had done for us, permitting us to revive Jesus. Joseph discussed with our friend the time of changing the guard. Then we left together, leaving the 2 soldiers watching over the burial place. Joseph said, "We now have to return home. That is the most important thing. We have to behave as if we knew nothing about Jesus' recovery." Simon added, "He will now sleep. The divine forces will now regenerate his body. We will meet him again here tonight. Then he will be fully conscious and sufficiently recovered." We returned home and told nobody what we had done and let them believe that Jesus was indeed dead. We went to bed, and after a few hours Simon awakened us. He said simply, "Come, we must return to Jesus." Nobody asked where we were going, and Simon and I left the house with Mary Magdalene and Magda in the direction of the tomb. Joseph had not yet arrived, but our Roman friend had relieved the 2 soldiers and was watching over the grave. He looked at us and said, "I don't know what is happening in the grave, but I think I do not want to know." Simon asked him, "Did your 2 soldiers notice anything? Were they suspicious?" The Roman replied, "For a moment they were not sure, but they are not smart enough to draw any conclusions. Perhaps you should give them a nice sum of money and say it was in gratitude for their looking after the grave and letting you have access to it." Simon asked, "Where are they now?" The Roman replied, "I sent them away and told them that the family would generously reward them for staying at the grave with the corpse." Simon gave him money, enough to satisfy the soldiers. Our Roman friend left us, and we were alone waiting for Joseph of Arimathea. After some hours he eventually appeared, very out of breath. Simon asked him, "What happened? Why are you so late?" Joseph replied, "You cannot imagine what happened to me. The priest forced me into a room and locked me in. They wanted to imprison me." We gasped, "How did you get out? How did you escape?" He replied, "It was a miracle. After they had left me, the door suddenly burst open all on its own, and I was able to leave without hindrance. That's why I'm so late." Simon laughed knowingly. "Come now, we must act. There is no time to lose." Together we managed to remove the stone behind which Jesus was lying, and Joseph gave Jesus another drink. Mary Magdalene, Simon, Joseph, and I were there as Jesus returned to life. He had returned to us. Slowly he sat up and we welcomed him out of the grave. He smiled as if nothing had happened. But he had changed. Something about him was different. Simon brought him fresh clothes and Jesus dressed himself. He stood in front of us in silence and Mary Magdalene moved towards him. He looked at her and said, "Please, do not try to tie me down. You will not find me in the same being as the one who left you." Simon was quick-witted and said, "I think we should leave this place as quickly as possible." Simon helped Jesus, who was still somewhat weak. Together we walked around the outskirts of the town, avoiding busy streets, to avoiding being identified. Eventually we reached Joseph of Arimathea's house. We heard later that the two soldiers returned to find the grave empty and let themselves be persuaded by our Roman friend that we had stolen the body. To avoid a disgrace, the high priest bribed the two soldiers to spread the word that we had stolen the corpse of Jesus, but they had no interest in finding it, so we appeared to be the culprits, but so that using all our discretion we could stay out of danger. We were at least safe for the time being in Joseph's house. We were all silent until Jesus spoke. "We do not have much time in Jerusalem. We must leave here as soon as possible. Do you know where my 12 disciples are, Joseph?" Joseph replied, "I informed them all after the crucifixion. They should come to my house so that I would be able to tell them what really happened." Jesus said, "They believe I'm dead." Joseph replied, "We thought it best not to tell them our plans. We did not know whether our plans would be successful." Jesus answered, "God's plans are always successful." Simon went to Jesus and said, "Jesus, my friend, would you like us to remain, or would you like to be alone?" Jesus replied, "Please leave me alone with my disciples. I would like to talk to them in a private. Come back tomorrow evening. We must decide how we can leave this place as quickly as possible." We returned to Arisa's house, and for the first time in many days we were able to sleep peacefully through the night. Simon also slept deeply and peacefully. We did not inform any of the others where we had been, and nobody dared to ask us. They all thought we only helped Mary at Jesus' grave. We slept well, and at breakfast Simon finally broke the news to Arisa. "Arisa, the Messiah is not dead." Arisa seemed not the least surprised and calmly said, "I was sure the whole time that you had done something that the whole world should not yet know about." Then she asked, "And what have you planned for the future?" "We will meet him this evening at Joseph of Arimathea's house and will plan how to leave Jerusalem unnoticed as fast as possible." Arisa sighed and said, "What a story, oh my God, my God. What have we all witnessed?" Then she looked at Simon and said, "You are all superhuman. You have grown into a stature for which the world is not yet prepared." Mary Magdalene, Simon, and I went to Joseph of Arimathea's house in the evening. I could not restrain a smile as I saw the expression on the faces of the disciples who were present. Jesus told us that none of them could believe that Jesus was standing before them. They had indeed believed that Jesus was resurrected as a ghost, and until they saw his remaining scars and were able to touch them. Jesus had spent the whole night with them, during which no one had slept. He had given every disciple specific instructions as to where they should go and how they could best leave the country. Jesus told them about various countries where their future lay, the vision he had for them and their mission. There was a curious atmosphere in the room, and it seemed that they all wanted to lose no time to leave immediately. It was the beginning and the end of very particular epochs, and we were said to leave all the disciples. Only the younger Jacob remained. When they left at last, Jesus said, Some of them face arduous destinies, but they are prepared to face the future. The world is full of disbelief and persecution. At present, it is better that all believe I'm dead. The high priest himself paid to reinforce this belief. Otherwise, the people might burn down the temple in their anger. Let us be happy to leave things the way they are.